Hello, everybody. Today's class, grocery shopping and label reading, we combine from the standpoint that it is difficult to be a smart shopper if you don't first understand label reading. So before I dive into this class, let me ask and show me by show of hands, who in here likes to grocery shop? Okay, who in here does not hate it, can't stand it, or just frankly dislikes it? Usually there's more hands for the second question than there is the first. But regardless whether you love it or hate it, I think we can all agree that unless we do it, it's going to be very difficult to eat heart healthy because we'll probably find ourselves dining out more frequently. So today, let's focus on understanding label reading so that we can get through the store more efficiently and hopefully make smarter purchases. To sum up label reading, here's the 5 recommendations that I would suggest we all consider when reading a label. And it starts with serving size. Understanding what the serving size is the best place to start because none of the other numbers will make sense unless we know what the serving size is supposed to be or what that serving size, what those numbers are based on. The second thing, fat and sodium. From a heart health perspective, I would argue that these are the 2 most important nutrients to focus in on. We have an entire class on fat and an entire class on sodium to emphasize their importance. But let's say, or at least summarize today, that both are valuable when we're discussing label reading. Third area of limitation, added sugars. And fourth, something not to limit, but rather to increase, would be fiber. And we'll talk about why that's important here in a minute. And then last but not least, I always recommend at least a quick glance, at the ingredient list so you understand what's in the food you're buying. So if we start with the serving size, this does not mean that that's all you can consume, but what it means is that all the numbers on the label below are based on the serving size in this example of 2/3 of a cup. Now we're going to pretend for all sakes of argument that this is prepared mac and cheese. Now it's definitely not, I can tell you that based on the numbers, but we're going to pretend because we're going to use 2/3 of a cup as a good place to start. Now I don't know how many people will feel too stuffed by 2/3 of a cup of mac and cheese. So if you were to eat more than this, let's say double the serving size, you need to double all of the numbers below. Calories, the fat, the sodium, etc. Next, we shift our eyes to the fats. Again, we have a whole class on this. Saturated and trans fats are the 2 types we focus on reducing or limiting for heart health because of their negative impact on our cholesterol levels. We focus instead on unsaturated fats, which are not represented here on this label. For most people, if we look at the chart that I have below, we have a 1,500 calorie diet and a 2,000 calorie diet. This gives us a good estimate or a place to start here. 1,500 calories being a rough estimate for most women, 2,000 calories being a rough estimate for most men, but it gives us the following numbers. And this represents fat that is 25 to 35% of our calories, saturated fat that is 5 to 6% of our calories, and trans fat that is a gram or less. Now these recommendations come from American Heart Association, but if we treat them like a budget, okay? For some reason, it's a lot easier for me to do math if I pretend that there is a dollar sign in front of it than a gram symbol after. So if we're looking at this from the 1,500 calorie column, 10 grams or less is my budget for saturated fat, or $10 or less. 2,000 calorie diet, $13, so to speak, or less of saturated fat. So in this example food over here, 1 gram of saturated fat. Well, $1 out of my $10 budget is not that big of a deal. But if I plan to eat a whole bunch of mac and cheese, or if I plan to have it alongside other high saturated fat foods, I need to account for the budget accordingly. The next major nutrient is sodium. And you'll notice I skipped over cholesterol. You have my permission to ignore this on the food label. Cholesterol in food has not been shown to increase or elevate the cholesterol in our body like the saturated fat does. There's been major petitions to remove it from the food label. That has yet to happen. But to simplify label reading, don't worry about that. Okay? Skip over it because we're going to talk about sodium. Sodium, or another word for salt, is recommended to be reduced in a heart-healthy diet because of its impact on blood pressure and blood volume. If you have heart failure, if you struggle with high blood pressure, or if you had a valve replaced, I recommend that you stay on the lower end of the budget provided, so 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams for those three populations, and up to the 2,300 milligram budget, so to speak, if you had bypass surgery, a stent placed, or a heart attack. Now, this can be a tough number to reach, especially if you're not mindful of how much sodium is in packaged and processed foods already. So awareness is certainly the first step. And also remember that foods don't have to taste salty to be high in sodium. Foods like packaged breads, desserts, snack mixes, baking mixes, more of our convenient type items. These are all surprisingly high sources of sodium that I wouldn't say generally taste salty. So again, get in the habit of reading these labels so you know, is this a budget worth spending? Fiber has some pretty impressive benefits for heart health. It helps to lower our bad cholesterol and allows us to stay fuller longer because of its impact on satiety. Fancy word for our fill factor. And we have a whole class on fiber, so we'll talk all about its heart health and body weight management benefits in that class. But remember, the goal is about 25 grams per day. Now, what can be difficult is that foods high in fiber, like fruits and vegetables, they often don't come with a sticker with nutrition facts listed. You can try to aim for 2 to 3 servings of vegetables a day and 1 to 2 servings of fruit a day. You're going to be a lot closer to that 25 gram recommendation than if you're trying to penny pinch your way around the store and hit 25 grams of fiber off of packaged and processed foods. And lastly, the nutrient to focus on are added sugars. Added sugars have been shown to increase triglyceride levels, increase our risk for diabetes, and increase the chance that we'd be obese and unhealthy. For that reason, added sugars have been listed on ingredient facts, nutrition facts, and will be required on all food products within the next 1 to 2 years. And like the name implies, added sugar is what it sounds like, sugar added to food. So if you think about an apple, now apples are naturally sweet and they would have total sugar in them, but there's no sugar added to an apple. The recommendation is 24 grams per day for women or 36 grams per day for men, which is the equivalent of 6 to 9 teaspoons of added sugars daily. Staying within that budget can help prevent some of the negative consequences associated with diets high in added sugar. Now, we didn't talk at all about percent daily values. That's that number, the percentage column listed on the far right of the label. Skip over that, okay? If you've been coached or taught to read that in the past, what I always try to remind people is that now we are a special population, which means we have special recommendations. So those percentages no longer apply to you. Don't use them. Instead, try to focus in on the numbers and the budgets I gave you earlier. If you've never read labels before, if you've never read them like this, what I recommend is starting with one thing outside of the serving size. Okay, so picking the fat or the sodium or the fiber or the sugars to focus in on to try to really understand food products that meet the budget you're trying to work with, ones you like, where they're found. Once you feel comfortable with that, then add on the second recommendation to look at. Taking these strategies for label reading and applying them to smart shopping, I put together 5 different tips. I know it says rules on here. I hate that word though. Let's talk tips for smart shopping. Tip number 1, meal plan. Who's ever gone to the grocery store, purchase, let's say, $80 worth of food and come home with nothing to eat. Well, you certainly have something to eat, right? You just spent $80 at the grocery store. But if you didn't have a plan for how to use it, that $80 doesn't make sense when it comes to the food items you bought. It's a little bit here, it's a little bit there, and it's maybe meals that you're used to making week in and week out. Most people have a general idea of breakfast and lunch. It tends to be dinner where we get stuck. So try to plan at least 3 dinners per week and the ingredients you're going to need to make those meals. So for example, if we're having tacos, that sounds great, except I need to make sure I have the meat, the cheese, the lettuce, the avocado, the shell, the sour cream, the salsa. If I don't have all those things, Taco Tuesday is not going to be very taco-y. So make sure you've written down or already have the ingredients that are going to make the meal possible. If you plan 3 meals a week, maybe you get leftovers for 1 or 2, and all of a sudden you went from 0 planned meals to 4 or 5. It's not bad. Write things down or keep something maybe more digital or electronic on your phone or tablet. What are other ingredients you're running out of, staple items that you would normally have? As you run out or use up something, add it to your grocery list so you're not left without key spices or other ingredients that you take for granted as always being there. If it helps to use other resources, consider apps available for list making or meal planning. An additional resource I'd point you to is the OSF website. I'll say it slowly and I'll say it twice so you can write it down, but it's www.osfhealthcare.org/recipes. Again, www.osfhealthcare.org/recipes. Hundreds of ideas from sides, entrees, desserts, and everything in between to help you come up with a meal plan that fits your needs, hopefully your tastes and your budget. And once you made that list, you might as well use it. So tip number 2, shop weekly, or really it should say shop regularly. If your budget allows, every 7 to 10 days is a good time to be shopping so you can keep fresh produce and meat in your house. If that doesn't work with your budget, then try to shop at least frequently enough to keep your freezer well stocked with frozen produce, frozen meat, and or frozen seafood. Also consider setting aside a certain date and time so you can move through the store more quickly and also already have this time allotted for. If you're already coming to cardiac rehab 3 days a week, that's a routine. Same thing with grocery shopping. If we can make this a habit or routine, we're much more likely to do it efficiently and also not go so many days in between trips and make it a disservice. If you hate grocery shopping, don't go the first Friday of the month or on the weekends, where researchers say you'll spend an average of 7 to 10 additional minutes at the store, which can feel like an eternity for you haters out there. But maybe consider going mornings during the week or afternoons on weekdays. Evenings on the weekend, that's another good time to consider going. Tip 3, buy real food. As often as possible, food that has minimal packaging and ingredients you at least can understand. I contrasted real foods with fake foods, but a couple things I wanted to highlight. Real foods generally are foods that aren't going to keep forever. Items that are boxed, bagged, canned, they got a pretty hefty shelf life. If those don't expire for another 6 to 12 months, it may not be the realest of foods we've ever seen. If it sounds too good to be true, it's a junk food that promises health claims, it may just be. If we put too much stock into reading the front of the package, we can quickly lose sight of what's in the item we're buying. Don't worry about the claims or the marketing or the highlights at the front of the box or the front of the can offer. Instead, get in the habit of turning your product around so you know exactly what you're buying. A lot of times that means shopping the perimeter. Tip 4. Most grocery stores, if you were to close your eyes, are set up similarly to this, or flip-flopped for some Walmarts and Aldis. But the idea is that perimeter is going to contain more of our fresh, and less processed food items. Doesn't mean that the middle aisles are off limits. There's still some great foods and items, ingredients that can be found here, but this is also where we're going to see multiple aisles of snack and junk food. We're going to find our sodas and our juices. We're going to find a lot more items that have a shelf life, probably older than some of our kids and grandkids. So instead, opting for perimeter shopping can help us stay within not only our health budget, but hopefully stretch our financial budget as well, so we're filling up on foods that are best for us. I won't read all of these bullet points, it's why they're on your slides to take home, but a couple areas I wanted to note on this perimeter shopping. When it comes to fruits and vegetables, make sure you really identify or really take time to look at your fruits and veggies. Pick them up, really look at it, okay? Just grabbing an apple and going home with it, or filling a bag full of produce, you get home and you realize half of it's bruised or punctured, or it doesn't look as good as you thought it did. Now that's probably going to go in the garbage or get wasted, which is a lot more expensive than buying the food and eating it. If there's convenient items, maybe you love, let's say, salad, but you hate actually making the salad. It may be more worthwhile and a cost savings to buy the pre-washed, pre-cut bags of lettuce or spinach, as opposed to buying a head of lettuce that's going to come home, sit in your crisper drawer for 2 weeks, and stink up your fridge when you finally remember it. That $1.89 you spent on the romaine, that's in the garbage, not nearly as good as the $4 you might have spent on the big tub of washed lettuce and ate up over the 7 to 10 days it was there. Fish in the back of the store. The darker the color, the richer it is in omega-3s. Generally, this means salmon, tuna, mackerel, and herring. And remember, omega-3s are the heart healthiest types of fish because they can help lower triglyceride levels, reduce inflammation, and help us better manage cholesterol levels. Lighter colored, like our whitefish, snapper, perch, cod, these are still good options, though they don't have omega-3s or as many omega-3s in them as our darker colored fish, but they're still a great source of protein, vitamins, and minerals without a lot of fat. Frozen fish works well too, and oftentimes I'd say they're just as nutritious as fresh. I would recommend though that you check where your fish is sourced from. Traditionally, you'll find that right under the nutrition label or near the ingredient facts or the ingredient information, and it'll tell you farm raised or farm raised in the United States. Wild caught would also be fine, but fish raised internationally, it's not held to the highest of standards and sometimes can be questionable what those fish are being fed. So I do recommend being cautious if you are buying fish internationally raised or caught. When it comes to other sources of protein, for beef and pork, poultry, I've got recommendations here. Now, beef and pork are naturally higher in saturated fat than a lot of our poultry cuts are going to be. So looking for round or loin as keywords can help you identify leaner cuts of these meat categories so you don't feel like you have to eliminate them completely. Ground meat, that's 90% lean or leaner, and that applies both to beef as well as to poultry. And ideally skinless when we're talking poultry items, because the skin is where most of the saturated fat is found. Dairy can be a high saturated fat food group, so looking for non-fat, low-fat, or skim versions of yogurt, cheese, cottage cheese, sour cream can be a really good place to start to minimize saturated fat impact from our dairy foods. And then the frozen section. Frozen fruits, frozen vegetables, awesome to have on hand, because in 5 minutes your bag of frozen veggies goes from freezer to microwave and your side dish is ready. Or frozen fruits that otherwise, in the winter time, berries probably less likely to get consumed or be affordable than they would be if they were frozen in central Illinois. Set them out to thaw for a couple hours if you don't like them frozen, or add them to yogurt, hot or cold cereal, and they'll thaw pretty quickly on their own. Frozen meals with less than 600 milligrams of sodium. Some brands to look out for that help meet this criteria would be the Michelina Lean Gourmet. Not the traditional Michelina, those are super high sodium, but Michelina Lean Gourmet. Healthy Choice Cafe Steamers, they offer a lot of good options. Sometimes just the traditional Healthy Choice will as well. But Healthy Choice Cafe Steamers tend to be lower sodium. The Eating Well brand, Evol, which is relatively new and it's love spelled backwards. And sometimes you'll also find lean cuisines that meet this criteria. Amy's Organic, though a little bit more costly, they oftentimes have a lot of vegetarian options and even some meat dishes that are 600 milligrams or less per serving of sodium and found in the frozen section, although the Amy's brand typically is found in the health food section. But those inside aisles, they're not all bad. And if we look at some of the options we'd find there, grains, for example, breads, cereals, buns, tortillas, English muffins, rice, pasta, oatmeal, there's a lot in this category. And when we're choosing grains, if we're intentional to choose whole grains, we're going to get the benefit of some good B vitamins, a lot of fiber, and healthy nutrients all across the board. Not all your grains have to be whole. The recommendation is at least half of the grain choices you eat throughout the day would be considered whole grain options. And the only way to tell is to see if the first ingredient is whole something. Not by judging the color, not by relying on the front of the packages, because what's frustrating is a lot of times marketing will have its way with the front of the package, and what otherwise would seem to be or appear to be marketed as a health food with all these claims of fiber and whole grains, the first ingredient, enriched unbleached flour. It's not the word whole, which means it's not a whole grain. Canned goods, an economical way to eat, and certainly one you can still continue, but do be mindful, canned foods can be very high in salt. Rinse them off. 30 seconds under running water washes 40 to 60% of the sodium straight down the drain. But what about the instance of canned soup? You're not going to rinse that off, right? So get in the habit of label reading. This is a good aisle to practice label reading. What other options exist? Are there alternatives? Are there other brands that offer lower sodium soup options? Or is it a combination? If I'm making a chili and I'm using canned chili beans, the whole point of chili beans is so I get the gravy with them. And chili beans are hard to find low sodium. So maybe it's making sure that the other ingredients I'm choosing in that aisle, kidney beans or red beans, that they are rinsed or that they're low sodium. That tomatoes or the tomato juice would be reduced sodium. So I can find a better way to balance out some higher sodium canned options with lower sodium alternatives. And what about snacks? Are they bad for heart health? Are they off limits? Absolutely not. But what I recommend with snacking is that more often than not, you try to be intentional with these choices too, so that your snacks are filling and satisfying and not something that you just keep reaching your hand back into the bag in the box for more and more because they taste so darn good. Ideally, snacks would be balanced with fiber and protein. Unfortunately, a lot of common snack foods are higher sugar, salt, or fat options. So I put together some common combinations with fiber and protein that you may find pretty darn good. And you don't have to just do the apple and peanut butter. Use the apple and string cheese. Or maybe it's going to be popcorn and, I don't know, some pistachios mixed in there. Being mindful that you can mix and match some of these fiber-protein combinations that you wouldn't maybe otherwise think of or consider combining, but can be a much more satisfying snack option. What do you think this one shows? What happens when you shop on an empty stomach? Usually not good things. So my last tip, never shop hungry. If you are running to the grocery store after work and you haven't eaten anything since lunch, you might want to try to find a quick snack before you head into the store because you're much more likely to make impulse purchases and go off budget when you shop on an empty stomach. All of a sudden, everything looks good and everything seems like a good idea. If you're shopping with other people, maybe it'd be wise to keep a box of granola bars in your car so everybody gets doled out a snack before they head into the supermarket. For those of you that like to use a phone or device, here's a couple different apps, and then I have the YouTube links. I just recommend going to YouTube and typing in Shop Well or Opt Up and watching how to use or how to consider using these tools. Now, both require location sharing. If you don't like that with your phone, you're not going to like these different technological ideas. But with the Shopwell app, for example, you can be moving through the grocery store, scan a food item, and it'll tell you, is this a good choice? How does it fit with your goals? But then also if there's a better choice in the same aisle or in the same store. So what else should I choose instead? A common complaint I get is that eating healthy is just too expensive. And here's what I'll say for that. It can be expensive when we're not being mindful of what we're getting. The more we get into practice with making a list and sticking to it, trying not to shop on an empty stomach, filling up on higher fiber foods like our fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, so we're less likely to indulge in snack foods or overeat at mealtime, we can stay on budget maybe better than we think. But here's a few additional tips to consider. Look for generic brands. Buy on sale. Oftentimes, if you know that there's a protein source or maybe it's a side dish you really enjoy and it's on sale, if you can afford it, buy extra. So when it's not on sale next week, you still have plenty in the house and you're not having to pay more for it. Unit pricing. The little number that's often to the top left of the traditional price tag can be a good way to compare the ounce to ounce value to see if there are other brands or other sizes of products to consider that might actually be cheaper in the long run based on the amount you get by volume. And gosh, the last art of couponing, whether it's digital or paper, making sure you're looking for those savings when or if at all possible can certainly help, because 50 cents there or $2 there can really add up to make a big difference. To summarize, put together a little bit or a few bullet points here to remind us what to focus on when we're talking produce, animal foods, grains, or snacks. But like anything, what I recommend is starting with one area and aiming for improvement, not perfection. So what's one thing you want to try over the next few weeks? One key on the label and one idea when it came to our 5 smart shopping tips. Focus in on them, see if it can become a habit versus something that's a forced behavior, and by all means, feel free to reach out for help. Take a picture of labels, bring product labels in, or try to write down brand names so I can look them up on my own time. And we can try to find different ways to build grocery lists that are going to be the most effective for you. With that, I wish you all a great rest of the day. Take care.